What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Dingersley. This is my co-host, Robert Watson, right over to the one side of me. I'm not going to say right or left because I don't know what side you see him on. But we are back for another talk here. Hope that you guys are having an awesome day. It is Monday, and stupid daylight savings time that I wish would go away is attacking us all.
Good morning. I hope you're having a marvelous Monday. So let's talk about being manipulated by the media,
Manipulated
shall
by the
we?
media? Does that happen?
It might. It might. The funny thing is, I'm doing some research for a paper I'm writing, and I'm reading a book from 1986, and the book is called "The Creation of Reality," and it's a
Mm-hmm.
critique of the media in 1986, right? Where the understanding, especially coming out of Vietnam and the situation with the Church Commission and all this was everybody knew that the media was manipulated, right? But
Right.
and so he was really just saying what everybody knew. And it's funny we come forward, my gosh, almost 50 years, right? We come back 40 some odd years and we're in the position of saying, well, no, it's the Russians that are manipulating us. It's the Chinese that are manipulating us. No, no, folks, it's the Americans that are manipulating you. Guy made a great quote. He said that if you can't see anything wrong with your side and your position, and you can't see anything right with the opposition, you're being manipulated.
Yeah. That,
Okay, you
that makes a
just
lot of
are.
sense too, because there is, I mean, that's the annoying part is there is a right and a wrong on both sides. There's an in between that none of us seem to be able to find. And,
Mhm.
we talked about like the majority of rules a couple weeks ago and how it's amazing that there are so many people who see it one way right now and the other people are just throwing a fit about it. And then the media is just throwing all this bullshit at you where it's like interference. They're throwing up interference to try to confuse you, and you can really find those people who have those one-sided beliefs because on the conservative side they listen to Fox News and they read certain papers and things like that. But then on the other side, it's like they watch the mainstream media and they don't pay attention to what's really going on. We talked about Doge last week and how people are saying that they're not being transparent. They literally have a website that you can go to, doge.com, and you can see exactly what they're doing, what they're going through at the moment, what they've looked at. And then if you look at like Fox News, which most of the people on the left refuse to look at, and they talk about it all day long, and there's lists of things like that. The White House press secretary basically read off a list of all those things. Trump has read off a list of all these things. Elon has read off a list of all these things that they're looking at, and they're like, oh, well, they're not being transparent. And it's like, how in the hell do you not? And it's on Twitter and it's on Truth Social. But if all you're doing is watching The View or NBC or ABC, anything that has a letter in it, then you're basically only hearing what they want you to hear. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, and the guy's comment back in '86, and of course he's publishing in '86, writing in '85. He's basically saying, hey, don't you realize that the media is owned by rich people?
Hmm.
And rich people want to stay rich. So what message are they going to give you?
Right.
Any message other than the one that says rich people are stealing from you. They're
Hmm.
not going to give you that message because that message is anti them.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's not real complicated. I mean, and think about all those years since. Has anything changed?
Hmm.
Is the media in the hands of the poor? I mean, come on, really? And the idea that we think, well, yeah, we're getting the true story. We're getting exactly what they want to tell us. My son, who is in Brussels now, was so shocked. I said, wait till you get to Europe and you get rid of the megaphone in the United States. Watch what happens to reality.
Hmm.
He got over there and he said, oh my gosh, it's stunning. I said, yeah, I know. And it's not that the Europeans don't have their propaganda. It's not that. It's just that the megaphone is so loud here.
Right.
It's so incredibly loud, just constant. And here's an easy one for you. This is an easy one for you. So, according to the media, according to the previous president, the Russians uh, created an all-out invasion of Ukraine.
Hmm.
How many times have you heard all out invasion?
Every single time.
Okay. Right. Okay. So it's a little thing called order of battle. What it is how somebody's going to conduct warfare.
Hmm.
So if someone's dug in a defensive position, do you think you can, for every one person that's dug in, that you can attack with one person? Do you think that's going to work? In other words, every person dug in has cover. The person attacking them does not.
Right.
So if you just think about it, so the guy who's on cover shoots the guy who's coming at him. So in an offensive sense, the rule of thumb is somewhere between 3 and 5 is the number you must have for every defender, right?
Right.
So if you have 10 defenders, you must attack with somewhere between 30 and 50, again, depending on technology, depending on how well they're dug in. It's just called force structure. Right? It's really simple.
Uh-huh.
So the Russians attacked 200,000 Ukrainians with 400,000 reserves. That's 600,000 Ukrainians. The Russians attacked them with 200,000 Russians. What's wrong with that picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, again, you could just say, oh, the Russians are stupid. Come on, man. Really? Really? They've never conducted any kind of warfare. They've never read our books. They don't know how to do this. They're clueless?
Yeah.
No. The Russians did not do an all-out invasion of Ukraine. Did the Russians invade Ukraine? Absolutely. Did they do an all-out invasion of Ukraine? No. So what did they have? They had limited objectives. But how many times have you been told the same thing? All I have to do when I'm talking to anybody with some common sense is bring that up. And they
Right.
immediately go, wow, that doesn't make any sense. I said, exactly. But you've been told so many times. And I see it repeated in books. I see it repeated by intelligent people. And all I want to ask them is do you understand force structure? And they say, well, the Russians have overwhelming technology. Really? If a guy's dug in a foxhole, what's your technology going to matter?
Right. Well,
Okay, you have to come out of cover. You think the technology is going to save you? I don't think so.
yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that there's a lot of this going on too. The other thing that I was just thinking about as we were talking about it is how, Russia at one point was part of the Soviet Union, right? And I think a lot of people don't even
Yeah.
remember this because they weren't around when it happened. And so there could be some stuff from the whole situation anyway that is a backup of what's going on where they didn't get what they didn't get part of the country that was supposed to be part of their country or anything like that. But it is just insane the amount of blame that is on this whole thing when it's between the two of them. Neither of them are innocent. And I think the big complaint right now, and they're even talking about it, is like Ukraine wants to be part of NATO because they want protection from Russia. And there's a lot of talk about the U.S. even just exiting NATO because they are the number one contributor and they're doing way more than any other country. It's pretty insane.
Right. Well, let's dispel the NATO myth. NATO's policy enshrined says that you cannot take a country in who has a border dispute. End of discussion about Ukraine.
Right.
End of discussion. Next discussion. Because again, there's a reason why they do it. You don't bring somebody into a defensive alliance who has a border dispute because what
Right.
you're doing is bringing the dispute into the alliance. That's pretty simple. Okay. Of course, they'd like to. There's a lot of back and forth here, right? Here's the reality. Okay. I believe that the current president, Zelensky, suspended elections last year. So, in other words, he is not the democratically elected president of Ukraine.
Right.
He has suspended elections. So, technically, he's existing in some form of, I don't know how you would want to say it, but they've suspended constitutional rule.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what does that make him? Well, technically a dictator. Okay. So, I mean, again, I'm not picking on the Ukrainian people. I'm not pro Russian. That's not it. But I'm pro facts.
Right.
You know, the reality is, and we've struggled with this, is we continue to want to parse our facts.
Hmm.
I don't like that fact, so I'm going to ignore it. I don't like the fact that Ukraine was never a democracy because we're fighting for democracy.
Right.
It was never a democracy. Okay, so I don't get it. Facts are facts.
Hmm.
If you still want to support Ukraine, I'm 100% behind whatever you want to do. But let's do the facts. Okay, it wasn't a wholesale invasion. Okay, did he take Crimea? Yes. Is that bad? Well, that's for everybody to decide.
Right.
But let's get the facts out and stay in a world of facts.
Hmm.
Let's not try to stay in a world of this is what we think it should be. This is what I want to feel better about. The question always has to be asked is why? Why are we involved? Ask that question. Why are we involved? Is there a point to that?
Yeah.
Is Ukraine in NATO? No. So we don't have an alliance reason to be there.
Yep.
So why are we there?
Yeah. And
Seriously, there was a right.
why are we offering help to them when, yeah, we have no skin in the game? There is something goofy about the whole deal.
In 2019, one of our think tanks, the oldest, I guess you'd say, the RAND Corporation, issued a report. Basically, I won't give you the speculative title, but I'll give you the solid title: How to Piss Russia Off. About 80 pages. In other words, how to piss them off.
Yeah.
So why would one of your think tanks put out a piece in 2019 called "How to Piss the Russians Off"? Like,
Yeah.
okay, right? Why are you trying to? And this is the thing that I think Trump has commented on several times. And I heard a British commentator last night. He's a member of the House of Commons, I believe. Said, "Why is everybody so anxious to create a war here?" And that's
Yeah.
the same question that Trump had is why are we trying to create a war? What in the world is going on? And that's again back to the let's parse the facts. We have a United Nations, right?
Yep.
Right. So why isn't Ukraine being debated in the UN? Let's look at other mechanisms than the ones we've been using.
Right.
There's a whole lot of people that have been killed in Ukraine through this war, and I just think we're in a position where I don't know that you've gotten anything out of this created event.
Hmm.
And when I say it's created, it was largely created. So my point is that again, I'm not pro-Russian, I'm not pro-Ukrainian, I'm pro-fact. My question for everybody is simply this: time to take a breath. This is a nuclear armed counterparty. It's time to take a breath. Not taking sides, I'm just saying time to take a breath. Let's see if we can find some peace.
Yeah. Well, it's insane too because that's all Trump has said that he wants to do, and you can see that. But again, the media will see it one way. Like the mainstream media will tell you one story, but if you look at it, if you watch that video last week or the week before that happened, where
Right.
Trump basically kicked him out, it was because they had him on, they had him ready to negotiate, and if they could get this one deal signed, then he would be able to go talk to Putin and bring them together to have them talk about it. And he doesn't. That's the thing. Like every time you listen to Trump talk about it, it's about the fact that he's tired of watching these young people die, fighting a war that they cannot win, and they continue to just keep fighting it. It just isn't going to happen. Like all there is a bunch of killing. I mean, if Russia wanted to end this right now, they could blow Ukraine off the face of the earth. It's not that hard to see, but they're not. And that means to me that there has got to be some sort of negotiation piece here where they can end this and not have to kill all these people in their country. And it feels like Zelensky, with the way that he's arguing and being combative and all that stuff, he feels like it's okay. And it's just funny for me to watch it.
We obviously don't know all the facts. I always, looking at a conflict, I know how to do war, but I question whether we know how to do peace. And that's the same thing when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan was, hey, I understand the war you're trying to conduct, but tell me about the peace. Tell me about after the war. What are you going to do? We're going to nation build. No, we're not. We're not good at it.
Yeah.
The point is that we shouldn't be creating conflicts and fueling conflicts when we don't know how to reach peace.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not being pro-Russian. You invaded, however, full invasion, whatever it is, you invaded, you're wrong.
Yep.
That's it. I don't quibble about that. He's wrong. So now what does the international community do?
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty tough. And again, at that point, the other thing that happened was it's interesting to see how once the U.S. decided that they were going to wait until he tried to figure out how he was going to react or how he was going to act if he would come back to the table, all these other people finally started pitching in. It's kind of weird. Like, I mean, they were probably pitching in before, but now they've come to the rescue and now they're actually talking about it, which is great because now that gets more countries involved. And the more that are involved and the more that are working on trying to find a solution, the better off it is, I feel like.
Yeah, and they've been contributing in the entire time and in differing amounts. But they
Right.
also reached the conclusion about 18 months ago that it was unwinnable.
Hmm.
And that doesn't really take any genius to figure out.
Right.
You have 52 million Ukrainians and 140 million Russians. Jesus is not really complicated.
Yeah.
And so, but that doesn't make what Putin did right. It doesn't mean the stronger get to push around that's not my point. My point is that you knew that it was a loser. My question is where in the world were the peacemongers? I
Right.
know where the warmongers were.
Hmm.
I got that. I just want to know where the peacemongers are who are sitting there saying, listen, let's stop the carnage.
Yeah.
How did you think this was going to go well? Again, it was funny. We were having a class at where I was at. And there were three of us who are prior service military and about 22 youngsters who had never served. And we were doing a readiness kind of exercise. And the exercise is the three of us who had served were basically doing everything they could to make sure we didn't, in the exercise, go to war.
Right.
And it was the 22 people that have never been to war before that were all going, yeah, let's just go to war. We're all like going, oh no, 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 no. You don't know you don't know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
There's
They don't
nothing good
understand
that comes of it.
the ramifications of that situation because they've never had to
No.
deal with it. Like you were in the military. I've lived through a couple of these, Iraqi wars. I mean, it's insane. They just don't
Yeah.
understand what that really means. People become more patriotic when we're at war, but it costs the country a lot of money, a lot of things to make that happen.
$2 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan, I believe, is the total. And my
Yeah.
question is, again, what was the point? I understand the war part. I understand the warmonger part. I just don't understand the peacemonger part.
Right.
Tell me how we're going to make a peace. Tell me how we're going to bring them into the international community. Tell me how we're all going to get along. Because
Yeah. I
we
mean,
have to, in the long and the short of it. We all share the same space.
if you think it works too, like one of the things that you can do is you can go look at the Afghani war. Look at how that turned out. Look at what happened. We were over there trying to make the peace and trying to make things, run one way. And then the moment that we pull out, what happens?
Mm-hmm.
All goes back the same way it was before. So maybe even worse because those people had time to build up and start over again.
Well, you do realize the Russians tried Afghanistan in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
That did not turn out well. I
Wasn't
believe
there?
Alexander the Great tried Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and that didn't turn out very well. So I'm just saying this has been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Oppressing people and trying to get in there and tell them how to live is really a poor strategy.
Yep.
I'm just going to say it's a really, really poor strategy.
Yep. It goes back to just like what happened in World War II. It's the same thing. It's like we're going to tell these people that this is the way that it's going to be. We're going to eliminate a whole freaking, race of people, and we're going to make everyone be our way. It doesn't work.
Not well. No, it doesn't. And that's back to the idea of when you understand the manipulation in the media manipulation of, we got to get everybody on one side because of one set of circumstances. My point is that let's stop selling war. Let's start selling peace.
Yep.
Okay. Let's stop selling, things that are divisive and start selling things that are uniting.
For
Tough,
once, the
but
Miss America pageant ladies were right. Let's find world peace.
That's true. What do you want? I want world peace.
Yep, exactly. So Nikki asks, how does the war end? What's going to cause this thing to end? What's your thoughts?
Well, so
Loaded
in the
question.
1920s, yeah, really loaded question. In the 1920s, Stalin, in his infinite wisdom, decided to repopulate the area in eastern Ukraine with Russians.
Mhm.
So the people in Russia, in eastern Ukraine are largely Russians. And I'm not saying they're all, it's like 55%. So
Right.
they're Russians, not only Russians, but they're Russian speaking. Again, blame Stalin. Putin had nothing to do with it. So the idea that you take a line and separate people, like if all of a sudden you took a line and you moved it and cut half of the United States and just magically drew a line, you're going to have a problem because people on both sides of the line think they're Americans. People on both sides of the line, or some lines in Ukraine, are Russian, not Russian, Ukrainians. People are very nationalistic. I get it. So your struggle is here is what do you give people as far as autonomy, right? The lines that people currently have in the battle lines are probably going to be the lines of whatever truce or peace accord you're going to get. The
Mhm.
problem is that's not going to solve the problem.
Right.
The problem is that people have to be allowed to kind of come to their own democracy. And in this case, the people in eastern Ukraine. And that means if the people in Crimea vote, and I'm not saying they voted for the Russians like 98%, but they did. The question is if the people in Crimea vote to stay as Russians, be Russians. If the people in eastern Ukraine vote to be Russians, then they should be Russians. If they vote to be Ukrainians, they should be Ukrainians. Come on, man. But you notice we're not talking about that. We're not talking about letting people vote. We're not talking about people getting to make their own decisions. We're talking about arbitrary lines that we draw on maps. And then we say, okay, on this side, you're that. On this side, you're that. Those lines, those arbitrary lines on maps, got us in trouble after every single conflict since the beginning of mankind. Because why? Because they're in many cases arbitrary. So your peace in Ukraine is a long-term settlement over lines on a map. And that's not going to come with any peace deal. That's going to come slow and it come times. And remember, it's going to be a crap load of hard feelings.
Hmm.
So can you imagine a line in the sand? You draw it, and on one side you have a Russian soldier in uniform. On the other side you have a Ukrainian soldier in uniform, and you don't think they're going to exchange fire? You don't think there's a little hard feelings?
Right.
So you understand that this is not simple. Because once you go to war, it's like fighting the bully in your neighborhood, right?
Hmm.
You might beat him at one time, but do you think that the bully goes away? Well, not if he doesn't leave the neighborhood. Okay. So that's one of the problems with peace in Ukraine.
Yeah.
One of the problems is the lines that everybody draws. How angry do you think that the Ukrainians are going to be going forward about any loss of territory?
Right.
I can't see them being. So that's the problem with your peace.
Well, and it's tough too because you kind of wonder, like, based on that information, you wonder if those people who were moved into Ukraine from Russia that were Russians and now are Ukrainians turn on, turn on Ukraine. Like, why wouldn't they? Like, if they had some little bit of loyalty, but they were moved over there, what's stopping them from doing that and causing this whole thing to be the other way around? So I don't know. It's just a tough thing. And I feel like people are sitting there harping on Trump for being mean to Zelensky in the Oval Office, but they didn't see the whole conversation. They didn't know what was going on. And Zelensky does not give off any vibe that he's ready to end the war, in my mind. What the vibe that he's giving off is he wants the U.S. to come in there and fight, and we are not going to go get in a war. That's the whole thing. Trump is against war. That's all there is to it. And we can't keep throwing money and weapons and all those things to Ukraine. They need to figure this out on their own. And it's a tough thing. It's like you sit there and you hear all these people like, I stand with Ukraine, but it's like, How much do you stand with them to the point where we're going to bankrupt our country by giving them money every single time and sending them weapons over to fight a war against a country that is far bigger, has far more nuclear power? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's insane.
Well, I mean, it's not even the money is. I mean, it's a couple, 3, 4, 500, whatever it is, $1 billion, whatever it is. It's not going to bankrupt us. The problem is that they're going to run out of military age males
Right.
before we run out of money. I mean, I think the real concern for us should be, as a people, as humans, is you've now wiped out a generation of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian males. That's devastating to a culture. Absolutely devastating to a culture.
Right.
These are the things we should be thinking about, right? And thinking about the Russian lives that have been lost. Remember, presidents make policy. Young men, they used to say, old men make policy that young men have to enforce. So there's a lot of young Russians that are no longer with us too.
Right.
That's not a positive, right?
Nope.
This is what I'm really talking about. The long-term implications of the fact that you've wiped out a whole tranche of military-age males in Ukraine. This can't continue.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. We could argue about things like Gaza. Have you looked at that place? It's rubble. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we should have as a culture, as a humanity. We should have grown out of this propensity to take really, really nice buildings and turn them into rubble. What have we learned?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I don't like about this whole situation either is that this money that we're giving to them, if you listen to, and there's a lot of people, like I've seen a lot of videos of, and who knows if it's true, this has not been fact checked, but you start to look on there and you look and you see, and they're talking about all the stuff, all the aid, all the things that we're sending to Ukraine, not actually getting to the people as well. I had seen one person from Ukraine talking about how like all the clothing and everything that was donated to them was taken, like it got into the country in a caravan or whatever. It was taken from that caravan and then went out and divvied out and all put into secondhand stores to sell to these people instead of just giving them what they need to help them get by. It's not going where it's supposed to be going. It's insane.
Yeah, and then that's the sad part, because unless we're on the ground, we really don't know what we hear.
Yeah.
We don't know whether our aid gets to the right places. We don't know how much graft and corruption is. No, we don't. And we can't stand up and say it's not going to the right place or say that it is going to the right place. We don't know.
Yeah.
And doesn't seem to be any accountability or audit of the process. And I think that's what people are wanting to see is, listen, number one, can we find some peace? Number two, where did the money go?
Yeah.
Let's be honest and, get real about it. It's okay. Wherever it went is wherever it went. But let's try to see if we can fix the problem now so that if we start trying to help people in the future, money goes where it's supposed to.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Doge is doing right now too. Like you look at all this USAID money, like it's not going to the places where it's supposed to be going. It's just like it's just like getting a bailout. You remember when GM got the bailout or whoever got all those bailouts back in 07, 08, and it was like, first thing they did was give their CEO a big old giant bonus out of this money that they got. And you're like, you're falling apart.
Yeah.
And now you're going to give a bonus to someone instead of taking care of it. If a bank gets bailed out, they're giving that money to the top person and giving him a bonus. It's like, that's insane. This money goes right back here, and this is where it needs to go. There needs to be accountability on where funds are going. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
So, great conversation this morning, Robert. Appreciate you hanging out with us. We will be back on Wednesday. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. Again, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please go over and leave a 5-star review. You can comment on this on YouTube, anywhere that you have access to it. It is available on video and audio.